April 30th, 1945. This is the date when the most dangerous man in modern history reached the final chapter of his story. But before it ended, Adolf Hitler and his newly wedded wife Eva Braun did one last thing together. They destroyed every trace of themselves. Photographs, documents, letters, all of it thrown into the fire. Hitler wanted nothing left behind. No evidence, no record, no story. But history always leaves something behind. 70 years later, the private diary of a French military officer and a collection of rare documents held by a private collector finally surfaced, and what they revealed painted a picture of Hitler's final days that the world had never seen before. Today, we're taking you inside that bunker, the place where a man who once dreamed of ruling the entire world spent his very last days on Earth. Before we go any further, here are 5 questions this story is going to answer. And trust me, every single answer is more shocking than the last. Question 1. What was it actually like inside that bunker? What kind of place was Hitler hiding in during his final days? Question 2. Why did Hitler marry Eva Braun just 24 hours before his death? They had been together for 13 years, so why wait until the very end? Question 3. Which one of Hitler's closest and most trusted allies betrayed him in his final 10 days? Question 4. When exactly did Hitler make the decision to end his own life, and what pushed him over the edge?
Question 5.
When Soviet forces found nothing but burned remains, how did they actually confirm that the body was Hitler's? 5 questions, every answer ahead. Let's get into it. Let's start with the bunker itself, because you need to understand this place to understand everything that happened inside it. In German, it was called the Führerbunker. Führer means leader. This was the leader's bunker. It was located in Berlin, not far from the famous Brandenburg Gate, buried 7 meters below the surface of the earth. It was designed by Albert Speer, Hitler's personal architect, and it was built to survive almost anything. First constructed in 1936, it was significantly reinforced in 1943 and again in 1944 as Allied bombing campaigns became more intense. Thick concrete walls, a bomb-proof ceiling. From the outside, it looked like the safest place in the world, but on the inside, it felt like a grave. A French military officer who entered the bunker in November of 1945 described what he found. To get inside, you had to walk down 26 steps, and with every step, the darkness grew heavier. At the bottom, he found a nightmare. Scattered papers, overturned furniture, melted candle wax covering every surface. The layout of the bunker was like a maze, narrow corridors and small rooms where the air felt suffocating. Hitler's private space consisted of 3 rooms. A meeting room, where he held 2 military briefings every single day, a small bedroom for Eva Braun, and 1 shared bathroom between the 2 of them. The bunker had a mechanical ventilation system to pump in fresh air, and it never stopped running. Day and night, it produced a loud, grinding hum that filled every room. For the people living down there, that constant noise was a form of psychological torture that never let up. Now let's talk about Hitler's condition during those final 10 days, because the man hiding in that bunker was nothing like the man who had once held entire stadiums spellbound with his speeches. By the end, both his body and his mind had broken down completely. Hitler had developed Parkinson's disease, a condition that causes uncontrollable trembling in the hands and a gradual loss of physical control. He tried desperately to hide it. He would keep his left hand buried in his coat pocket or hold it at an angle where the person across from him couldn't see the shaking. But in those final days, there was no hiding it anymore. His hand trembled constantly. Walking had become difficult. His face had turned pale and hollow. Officers who came to brief him were visibly shocked by how much he had deteriorated. By most accounts, he looked 10 to 15 years older than he actually was. His personal physician, Dr. Theodor Morell, gave him daily injections of glucose and vitamins, but it was like pouring water into a cracked glass. Nothing was going to hold him together at this point. The daily routine inside the bunker was suffocating in its monotony. Morning military briefing, evening military briefing. Each one brought worse news than the last Berlin was being lost, block by block, hour by hour, and through all of it, Hitler's deep-seated distrust of everyone around him never left him. Even in his final days, he was consumed by the fear that someone close to him would betray him. As it turned out, that fear was completely justified. Now let's talk about the woman who refused to leave his side until the very end, Eva Braun. Eva had been Hitler's companion for 13 years. They had never married, at least not yet. But when the time came, she made a decision that almost no one else in Hitler's circle was willing to make. She chose to stay. Historians and experts agree that staying in that bunker was entirely Eva's own decision. Hitler had reportedly urged her more than once to leave Berlin and go somewhere safe. She refused every single time. Inside the bunker, her days were extraordinarily limited. She spent most of her time in her small room, organizing her photographs, writing letters, occasionally sharing a cup of coffee with Hitler. But the letters she wrote to her friends tell a different story than the one she presented on the outside. In one letter, she wrote, "This place is terrifying, but I am happy here because he is with me." Those words reveal two things at once. On the surface, there is love and loyalty, but underneath, there is unmistakable fear and a profound loneliness that no amount of devotion could fill. Eva knew exactly what was coming. She stayed anyway. It was her choice, and she followed it all the way to the end. You need to understand what was happening outside that bunker, because without it, the desperation inside doesn't fully make sense. Berlin, which had once been the proud center of Hitler's power, was now a city on fire. Allied bombers were hitting the city day and night, without pause. The Soviet Red Army, at that point one of the most formidable military forces on Earth, was just a few kilometers away, fighting its way through Berlin's outer districts against what remained of the German defense. Hitler's forces still had roughly 900 tanks and close to 500,000 German soldiers defending Berlin, but none of it was enough. The Nazi military machine was disintegrating in real time. The people of Berlin were hiding in basements, bomb shelters, and beneath the roots of trees, doing anything they could to survive. Meanwhile, the radio kept playing Nazi music and propaganda, as if the world outside hadn't already made up its mind. A German soldier who returned to Berlin during those final days later recalled that he barely recognized the city, because in every direction, all he could see was rubble. It was at this point that even Germany's own military commanders began to accept the truth. This was over. The only question now was how it would end. Now we get to the betrayal, the moment that answered one of our 5 opening questions. The man who betrayed Hitler in his final days was Hermann Göring. Göring was one of the most powerful figures in the Nazi regime and one of Hitler's oldest and closest allies. Over the years, Hitler had given him some of the most important positions in the German government. In 1933, Hitler made him head of the Air Ministry. In 1935, he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the German Air Force. In 1936, he was put in charge of a major national economic plan designed to rebuild Germany's industrial power. And in 1941, Hitler officially named him his successor and deputy, meaning that if anything ever happened to Hitler, Göring was next in line. But in April of 1945, Göring did something that Hitler would never forgive. From a safe location far outside Berlin, Göring sent Hitler a telegram. In it, he argued that since Hitler was trapped in Berlin and apparently unable to make decisions, leadership should be officially transferred to him immediately. When Hitler read that telegram, the room went cold, and then he exploded. He immediately stripped Göring of every title, every rank, and every position he had ever been given. He declared him a traitor. He ordered his arrest on the spot. Göring was later captured, put on trial, and sentenced to death. But just hours before his execution, he took poison and died on his own terms. On one side, the Red Army was closing in. On the other, his most trusted ally had just stabbed him in the back. The walls were closing in from every direction, and Hitler was running out of room. On the night of April 28th, Hitler gathered the few people still with him and said simply, "The time has come." At 1 o'clock in the morning on April 29th, 1945, a small, quiet ceremony took place in the bunker. Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun were married. There were just 2 or 3 officers present as witnesses. No flowers, no music, no celebration. Just a brief official ceremony in an underground room while bombs fell above them. Perhaps Hitler's final act of giving Eva the recognition she had never officially received in 13 years. Immediately after the ceremony, Hitler summoned his secretary and dictated his final will and testament. In it he wrote, "My wife and I choose death. For us, it is better to die than to face the shame of surrender." This was the moment. This was when the decision became final and official. Not a breakdown, not a sudden impulse. A deliberate, calculated choice, written down and witnessed. April 30th, 1945, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, exactly 24 hours after the wedding. Hitler first gave poison to his dog, Blondie, a German shepherd who had stayed by his side through all of it. Then he and Eva walked into their room together and closed the door. A few moments later, a single gunshot rang out through the corridor. Hitler had shot himself. Eva Braun had taken a cyanide capsule. The staff had already been given their instructions. Both bodies were carried up to the courtyard above the bunker. Gasoline was poured over them, and they were set on fire. Even in death, Hitler was trying to control the narrative. No body for enemy forces to display. No photograph for the history books. No final image of defeat. That was why he had burned the documents, burned the photographs, and ordered his own body burned as well. When Soviet forces arrived at the bunker, they found only charred remains. The question was immediate and unavoidable. How do you prove that these are actually Hitler's remains? The answer came from an unlikely place. Hitler had a well-documented hatred of dentists. It was something the people around him knew well. As a result, several of his teeth had deteriorated badly, and at some point, he had commissioned a highly distinctive custom dental bridge, a device made of gold that held together several damaged teeth in a very specific configuration. It was unique. And unlike flesh and bone, gold survives fire. Soviet forensic investigators compared that dental bridge against Hitler's existing dental records, and the match was confirmed. The remains were, without any question, those of Adolf Hitler. And that is the story. The story of a man who once dreamed of ruling the world for 1,000 years, and who ended his life alone in a dark, damp, noisy underground room, with only one person left who chose to stay. History has a way of delivering a verdict all on its own. The millions of innocent people who died because of this war. The cities reduced to rubble. The families torn apart across an entire continent. All of it was the price of one man's unchecked obsession with power. And that obsession ended, not with a 1,000-year empire, but with a single gunshot in a bunker. I hope you will like and share this video as well. Thank you very much for your loving comments. I will see you in the next wonderful video.